Hello and welcome to an Infinity the Game battle report. In this game we're playing Combined Army, 250 points with 100 points of reinforcements, versus Haqqislam, 300 points, no reinforcements. The scenario is going to be Decapitation, and let's just talk for a second about why we're playing this. So one of the big unanswered questions about reinforcements is the extent to which it will become just part of Infinity in terms of play. It's been billed by Corvus Belli as an ITS variant style addition to the game, which realistically I think is them kind of just softly, because they're not exactly sure how well this is going to be received. As far as a mechanic goes, it's a really big addition to the game, on par with, for example, the addition of sectorals, which occurred back in Human Sphere M3 a long time ago now, outside of some players' living memory. In terms of online discussion, I've actually seen pretty mixed commentary about whether or not people think this will become just the new way to play Infinity, or it will just be a variant like Mercenaries is, i.e. not the default, really not significantly upticked. And I am interested to see if it's possible that reinforcements could become a part of the game, but optional. Can you just go down to the local game store and say, hey, I have a 250 point list with 100 points of reinforcements, who's around to play? And someone says, oh yeah, I got a 300 point list, and those are compatible experiences. Can you put those on the table against one another and expect them to be a broadly balanced experience? Because if the answer to that question is yes, we kind of have the best of all worlds, where reinforcements can become a default part of Infinity, but it's not the only way to play Infinity. Now, ahead of recording this game, 3 days ago now, I put a poll up on the Infinity Channel community, basically asking what did people think would be stronger and what would be weaker? Who would be in the advantage position in a 350 points versus 250 plus reinforcements point game? And interestingly, with over 100 responses, the result was almost a dead heat. I think it was something like 51% in favor of the 300 point army, but with many people kind of pointing out that it was really going to depend. As always, it would depend on things like player experience, etc., but also it would depend very much on who was going first and the scenario, etc. So this game today, again, it's just caveat emptor as usual. We don't have the full rules, etc. But what we're doing is stress testing the environment. A slight majority of people, again 51 to 49, thought that reinforcements would be weaker, and again that's just slightly. And people have noted that probably the advantageous position or the toughest position for reinforcements would be going second in a very fighty scenario. And so with that in mind, what we've done is we've engineered a circumstance. This game, my opponent and I agreed ahead of time, we would be playing Decapitation, so very annihilation forward, and we would fudge Lieutenant roll. So my opponent Chris knew that he would be going first in Decapitation against a reinforcement army, and so basically he had carte blanche to build a list that would perform as well as he could possibly make it under those circumstances. He would have access to the Takamoto seasonal rule from ITS, everything that's currently available to the faction that he chose, which eventually was Haqqislam. And for my part, I would be trying to build the strongest combined army list that I could with the information that we have available about combined army reinforcements and just a 250 point list. So let's have a look at those lists. So this is the Haqqislam list that Chris would write, using pieces that he likes and which are familiar to him. The only thing I think is maybe a little questionable in this scenario / generally is the Tariq Mansouri lieutenant. Now, I am a big narrative fan of Tariq Mansouri, but at 52 points, he is an expensive boy, even with Lieutenant +1 order, which is a skill that I really like. However, if you're going to use him in a mission where there is reinforced tactical link, so you don't have to pay for chain of command, is kind of not a bad place to start. Otherwise, this is just a value town list. It doesn't have every single Haqqislam All-Star. It's notably missing both a Mukhtar and an Asawira, but otherwise there's plenty of stuff going on here. We've got mines, multiple mine layers, we've got the Libertos, we've got Zuleki and Arizova, we've got guided missiles, only one hacker, but we have a Hunzakut, which many people quite like, as an alternate source of deployable repeaters. There's a Hassassin Fidei with DACCW. We have two Ghulams with rifles and light shotguns. Potentially one of them could be a Fanus and the other one could be a Digger, but nothing wrong with Ghulams. They have light shotguns. You're getting kind of the same thing as is. And then you have one Cracker Renegade and one Digger. So discount 14 point assault elements. These are things that I would not typically put in a list. I usually find that Haqqislam wants to replace those kind of 14-point pieces with irregulars, but Chris doesn't like to run as many irregulars as I do, and that's fair enough. He also has an Azrael, APHMG, Big Honkin' Gun, and a Ghulam Doctor to keep it patched up. So overall, this list has got tons of close assault, lots of orders. There's somewhere in here you'll also see a forward observer remote, the Rafik with Red Fury. So this list has got 1 tactical awareness and 2 lieutenant orders and multiple impetuous. So this list is really front-loaded, barreling forward, potentially very good at delivering a Haqqislam style alpha strike. So playing into it, I have this combined army list. And what we've done is we've just put some placeholder pieces in my reinforcement pool. What I have as my reinforcements here is a Zeodron and 2, I think they're vector operators, whichever the ones with MSV and Mimetism are. Now, just as a quick note, if you look at the profile for that Exrah troop, it will say availability 1, but then in the force organization chart for reinforcements, it calls them availability 2. Either could be a mistake. I actually suspect probably the force organization chart is more likely to be a mistake, given that in another chart they listed a character as AVA2. But we've just gone with it for now. We'll see how important it is, and it would not have any impact on this game. Otherwise, what this list is it is the list that I took to Novacore and actually haven't played since. But it's this I took to Novacore slimmed down to 250 points. And it turns out that it slims down very, very well. Basically, it's that list with a couple of light deficiencies, but it cuts the Umbra Samaritan and 2 Imitrons. It doesn't have any Taiga creatures anymore, those turn into Garkis, and that frees up 3 combat group slots to afford the reinforcements and 50 points. And you still have a Chirontid, and you still have an Anathematic, and you still have Bit and Kiss, and a Missile Launcher, and Datarazis, and Garkis. And there is honestly kind of an argument to make here. This is perhaps not the best test of 250 points versus 300 points, because if I didn't have reinforcements, I actually think there are some 300-point lists that I could beat with this 250-point list, because this list is very, very good. And I still occasionally get messages from people saying that they hate me for having come up with this and publicized it to the world, because it sucks to play against. And I don't blame them. These two are really, really nice. I put this list away at Novacore, after Novacore, and I have not played it since. This would be the first time I'd rolled it back out, I think, basically since then. It was good to play it again. This list is really good. Anyway, let's jump into the game. So here's our table. On the left side, we have the Haqqislam deployment, and on the right side, we have the combined army deployment. Chris has, as I said, we fudged the dice roll. He is going first, and he spent a command token to hold back 2 reserves. Those orange things are all his camouflage markers, so let's run through what we've got. We have the Hassassin Barid on the rooftop here. We have the guided missile remote here. It is in a standing position. It's not going to have a ton of a line of sight, but it can kind of see down to there. And it can also see this rooftop here. This building we are treating as infinitely tall, but that still gives it a surprisingly good look at sort of like this portion of the rooftop. The Rafik Red Fury is going to be deploying here. The Azrael is here with its doctor behind it there. We have the doctor's helper bot on this rooftop here. The Digger has deployed down here and has rolled up +1 armor. The Krakot has deployed down here and has rolled up regeneration. And then we have just a sea of camouflage markers. But I am able to pretty quickly figure out what most of these will be, although I will get one of them wrong. So the Mimetism 0 and Mimetism 3 obvious Libertos are deployed here. The Sniper and its Mine are deployed here. Now this is obviously deployed in a way that is meant to, like, maybe one, keep it safe from Speculo Killers or Growth Operators, but realistically is designed to kind of try and fake me out. But there are too many troops to give that hidden information up. It's obvious that one of those is a Mine purely because of trooper count. This is Mimetism 3 camouflage marker, and I actually think it's going to be a Beast Hunter. I don't cotton that it could be a Hunzakut, because I don't play Hunzakuts as much as Haqqislam players commonly do. And so, I mean, it's going to ultimately not affect the game, but that's something that I get wrong. I think this thing is going to have a Panzerfaust, a Flamethrower, and a bunch of melee. Chris's HVTs are deployed here, and then one is hanging out back here. And then his reserve drops are going to be a Hassassin Fidei down here, and Tariq Mansouri himself there when he knows he's basically safe. For my part, the Anathematic is going to hidden deploy here, and then in my main reserve, I toss up between the Libertos and the Chirontid as my reserve pieces, and I ultimately decide to reserve drop the Chirontid, although it's very, very close. Because Chris has rolled a RIP 15 Lieutenant, I know that Tariq Mansouri is his lieutenant, and I haven't seen Tariq yet, which means I know that there aren't two Hassassin Fidays coming. I'm not playing against the double reserve Fiday Jabel. And because I'm not, a Libertos is a quite good reserve drop to kind of counter the Fiday. But I also think that the Chironte is going to be very, very important, and I don't at this stage know which gun Tariq is packing, although I suspect if I'd done an SWC count, I would. I'd be able to figure out that he had to have a rifle. So I decide to reserve drop the Chirontid just so I can position it to pin Chris's stuff back as best as possible, and also to not have it get got by the Fiday. The thing I don't want to have happen is to have the Chirontid placed somewhere and then him just walk the Fiday into combat with it, and then maybe I've got a Libertos counter deployment, but it just dodges the mine and then it ties up the Chirontid. So I want to put the Chirontid somewhere that's going to be challenging for him to get to. Otherwise, we've got an Icadron prone on the roof here. Now, this camouflage marker is right up on the 24-inch line, and with 16-inch deployment zones, I don't quite manage to get the Icadron in zone of control of the thing I think is a Beast Hunter but is a Hunzakut, but I do get it in light flamethrower range. That will matter. There's a Gaki down here. One of my HVTs, played by an Imatron, is there. The T-Drone missile launcher is here standing, and the reason why it's standing is that this thing it's behind is just taller than a Silhouette 3, but means the missile drone can see this rooftop here and this bridge here, which is going to be important. Otherwise, we just have prone repeaters everywhere. We have an R drone here. We have an R drone prone down here, watching the back table edge. We have this Icadron here. We have Bit and Kiss are hanging out down here. Kiss is actually on the gantry, hoping to be used as an ARO piece, just to give like something as an expendable ARO, and then the deployable repeater is there. And that in total means that basically I have repeater coverage like that. A lot of the table is potentially covered by repeaters. Finally, we have both that Arazi kind of at ground level down here and here, and another Gaki there. So Chris's reserve drop comes down and it's Fiday. I place down my Chirontid. But I'm pretty happy, again, when you are deploying this list and the Chirontid is your reserve, it means that like I put down like 100 points of stuff. Chris had no information, although he did figure out based on what he could see that, yeah, like there, okay, thanks, Rob. This is an anathematic Chirontid list. Awesome, I have to deal with this crap. But he couldn't know where the anathematic was, and so you get to preserve a lot of information. So the Fiday is going to be coming for Bit and Kiss, because they're really the only target, other than trying to go all the way into my deployment zone just to kill a missile bot without knowing necessarily where the hidden deployment stuff would be. So Chris is going first. I take 2 orders from his primary combat group. I am torn on that because Zalekia is in the second combat group, and I kind of spaced on that when he was showing his orders. Maybe should have taken orders from her because I think she's actually the scariest thing in the list. The Hassassin Fiday is also very scary. It's like, what can you do? Triage as best you can. There are a lot of orders in both pools, but I ultimately decided to take orders from combat group 1. So for Chris's first turn, he's going to launch kind of a multi-pronged attack. But it's difficult to attack this list of mine because there's not a lot that has much value. Nevertheless, he has a large order pool, so he's going to do a few things. So on what is my right flank, Zalekia is going to sort of tear up here, and she's going to end up basically, she will eventually want to come around and move, but first he has to suppress the Chirontid. So to suppress the Chirontid, here's a crack with the Al-Hawa first. It moves around to here. It actually catches the Chirontid at 32.05 inches, but he does have it out of range. And we have basically a couple of rounds of shooting. He hits me, he ends up doing 1 wound, and I guts around to here, which puts me a little bit further away. Tariq then uses his orders to come up and around here, and he wants to come around this way, but if he moves around this rooftop, he's going to get seen by my missile drone, and he can't quite suppress my missile drone yet. So what he does instead is he does the old jump out and then jump back, so it's like gaboing, 360, gaboing, and landing back here, and that gets him inside rifle range band of the HMG. Now, he's out of cover, I'm in cover. This is a risky fight for him, but he's taking it from within 16 inches. And after a couple of orders, basically, he lands enough hits. I think he does 1 more wound to me. And I'm like, okay, fine, you got me. And I go prone. With the Chirontid out of the way, Zalekia can make her run forward. And so she'll come up and around here, and she'll kill my HVT hanging out behind here. And she'll just sort of pause there for now to allow more stuff to be done. So the Rafiq is going to come up and around here, and it's going to kill this this second HVT. So that's immediately first turn without spending, basically just group 2 plus a little bit of orders from group 1. Both of my HVTs are down, so that's 4 points in the bag for Chris immediately. The Rafiq will pull back and end up here because the only things that can really attack it on this flank is this Gaki, so it just stays as far back as it can. And then the Hunzakut reveals and basically surprise shots the Ikadron, and they kill one another. Flamethrower burns the Hunzakut to death, Ikadron burns, gets shotgunned down, which clears out the repeater on this flank, and is definitely worthwhile for Chris to do. It happens. It's a good trade for me. Realistically, it's 9 points to 18. If I keep making those trades, I'm in a good position. But yeah, so the Hunzagut goes down, the Ikadron goes down, more violence ensues, and the Haqqislam for day makes its run. This actually happened slightly earlier in the turn, but it came up and around here. It just walks past the Gaki and into close combat with Bit and Kiss, with the idea being that it's going to kill Bit. It's going to take out the only visible hacker. I don't reveal anything to deal with it. It walks into close combat. It kills Bit, and ARO fire from other pieces puts it down as well. So again, like we think about the kills that have been made here, Hunzakut versus Ikadron, good trade for me. For Day versus Bit is much, much closer. Bit is technically a 21-point piece, but by killing her, Kiss is immediately rendered inactive. So, and my only visible hacker is down, which means that Chris knows I have the anathematic, but if I want to reveal to hack anything, I have to actually reveal the anathematic, which gives him some information. Now, it's at this point in the turn that I'm kind of regretting not stripping orders from Zalekia's group, because there have been multiple occasions where I would really have liked to have revealed the anathematic to take a plasma rifle ARO, but I can't. And the reason why I can't is that Zalekia is sitting here. And she, of all of the pieces in the Haqqislam list, is the one I am least willing to just YOLO and tank some templates from, because she has those flamethrowers. I am being very cautious with regards to her. My plan is to deal with her in my active turn. She's actually the scariest piece now that the Haqqislam for Day is down. So I am trading up so far. Things are going fine, but I'm not revealing the anathematic, and I'm not revealing the anathematic because if I do, Zalakia might kill it. So with me being very conservative and hiding, really the last things Chris does is just reposition a little bit. Tariq gets safe, he'll pop down here in cover. Hassassin Bareed will use the last couple of orders in the second combat group to lay a pitcher down there, and then it will get prone, and the Al-Hawa will recamouflage. And so in terms of first turn attacks, that's pretty okay. Chris has knocked out 2 of my 11 orders, I've knocked out 2 of his 17, 18, 19. But I have traded up. The thing is, I've traded up, but I'm down 4 points on scenario. I am, however, feeling basically okay. I don't think there are that many 250-point lists that could happily take second turn and face tank a 300-point list without reinforcements in the wings, but this is feeling kind of okay. So I go into my first turn and I elect to play things relatively conservatively. What I am not going to do is try and take casualties in order to trigger reinforcements. I don't think as a second player, based on what we know about reinforcements so far, you ever want to do that, because your first turn opponent is going to get 2 turns fighting you. They're not going to try and just edge you along on 49 points of casualties for those full 2 turns. Your opponent is always going to try and do as much damage to you as they can. If they don't manage to do 50 points of damage to you over 2 turns of playing, then you're probably winning already. So I think as second player with reinforcements, it's never going to behoove you to like attempt to take casualties in order to trigger things. I'm just going to play this turn conservatively in the knowledge that Chris will have a second turn of swinging at me and I will absolutely take casualties. So what we do is we just clean up as much as we can as safely as we can. Datarise, you're going to take some impetuous orders. I will actually, a Gaki that's managed to dodge will berserk into Zalekia. It will die all the way to dead, unfortunately, and she will go into Dogged. And then a Datarazi will impetuous and throw some smoke. And then I will spend 2 orders trying to put Zalekia down with the heavy machine gun. She's impetuous, she has no cover. I fail. I just can't do it. Like, that's it. Okay, fine. She's dogged. I don't need to do any more. That just informs how I will play the rest of this turn. The Gaki that's hanging out around here is going to use its irregular order to move and then dodge, and then it will berserk into the Rafik that's ended up here. And again, both of them will die. The Rafik will go unconscious, the Gaki will go all the way to dead from the Red Fury. The anathematic then moves into position and discovers, shoots the Al-Hawa to death. Nice, good kill, good kill. And then really the last thing of any note that happens is the anathematic finally reveals. Remember the Hassassin Bareed popped a picture down here? The anathematic just reveals and surprise attacks the Bareed straight through the repeater. I have surprise, Trinity Burst 4, I'm Whip 16, I don't care about your puny firewall, and unsurprisingly the anathematic puts the Bareed all the way to dead in 1 order. There was some risk that I could have gotten Oblivioned in ARO, but it was 11s on Chris's side versus 16s on mine, burst 4. If he had crit, I don't have an engineer, but Oblivion is not the end of the world. I reset on 7s, and I would have lots of AROs potentially to reset. So that's basically what happens over the course of my turn, and I don't suffer, I mean, apart from Gakis, I don't suffer any significant casualties. So I am actually kind of quite well up just on attrition. I'm just a long way behind on points because I haven't killed any designated targets. So here's where we're at the beginning of Chris's turn. We can see the Anathematic has sort of like durdled around here. It actually ended up spending the last couple of orders moving and trying to discover this Libertos and failing. Or sorry, discovered, automatically succeeded, and then couldn't kill the Libertos, and I wasn't willing to do any more. My Libertos has also moved around here and popped out of mine. Again, it's time to be a designated casualty. We need to just hold back the next turn. This is going to be, I think, the fulcrum point if 300 point versus 250 with reinforcements becomes relatively common. It's this second turn of the first player, if the first player has 300 points, that is the scariest, because you've taken a whole turn of them attacking you, you've swung back with presumably diminished forces, with less to start with than you would otherwise have with a 300 point army. Your reinforcements haven't arrived yet. They, as best we know, they can't. And now you have to endure another turn of attacking. This is why I haven't gone after either of Chris's HVTs yet, because you have to, like, its current objective, survive territory. If I survive this turn, even like moderately intact, if I've got one of my aspects alive and kind of any orders at all, then my reinforcements are going to arrive and I'm going to be in a probably good position. The reinforcements, we have to not overemphasize, like, reinforcements are actually kind of limited based on how I've been trying to build them so far. Like, there is only so much you can do with 4 and a bit orders, but it's still a whole bunch of material turning up with a very effective deployment tool. So if I just make it through to reinforcements, I'll survive. The end game will be mine, but I have to get there. So with that in mind, and nothing left to do, like there are no more objectives for Chris to do, but to kick my teeth in, he begins to move to kick my teeth in. The Libertos is going to go first. It'll move around here to trigger this mine, kill my Libertos. My Libertos places a mine in response, and the 2 Libertos die. So a mine will end up here, both Libertos being dead. And then basically it's the Tariq Manshuri show with one exception. The way has to be cleared first. And that's this Azrael's job. It gets shunted into Combat Group 2. It is the Master Breacher, so it's move 5-4. And it's going to come around to here, and then up to here prone. And then it's going to stand, and remember my T-drone is hanging out down here. It's going to engage and destroy my T-drone. This is 4 dice on 13s versus 1 dice on 12s, puts the T-drone down, and that means that Tariq is free and clear to move. But with a little bit more, there's a couple more orders left in that combat group. The Azrael moves up and around to here and puts this R-drone down as well. And at this point, I begin to be aware of the risk to my order pool because it's beginning to suffer. So Tariq will play out the rest of this turn using his 2 lieutenant orders and then all of the orders left in the pool. And it's going to be a kind of similar approach. We have a prone Charonted here and a standing anathematic here, and he wants to deal with them. So to do so, he's going to move up and around here. He's going to engage the anathematic at rifle range band, but he's going to really struggle to deal with it. Mimetism 6 is a hell of a drug, and Tariq's ballistic skill is just not that high. It's like ballistic skill 13 is not very good. So he gets up and around over here, and he actually cops a plasma rifle round, takes a wound, goes prone. So prone, now he moves across the gantry and into close combat with my Charonted, who is, we'll remember, is wounded. He swings at the Charonted, I nanopulse him, Tariq goes unconscious, and the Charonted survives. Now that there is basically pretty decisive. Tariq's odds, to be fair, of surviving the firepower that has hit him are exactly a coin flip. He took 1 nanopulsar and 1 plasma template round, and he's armor 3, BTS 3 with 2 wounds. But I think there is a strong argument that he should not have tried to fight the anathematic. Had he wanted to, he did have enough orders to just crawl, just go, just crawl along the rooftop, spend all of the orders getting into CC with the anathematic, because if you with the Charonted, sorry, because if you do that, you get there with 2 orders, which means the nanopulsar will wound you, sure, but then you will beat the Charonted to death. Yes, you will get spotlit while you do this. At some point, the anathematic is going to turn around to see this doorway, and it'll probably use all of your orders anyway. But doing that will put you in a situation where he's killed one of my LTs, even if he's about to lose one himself. Instead, with Tariq down and really not going to be recovered this turn, I will coup de grace him next turn. I am now beginning to be up on points because I've got more points killed and I've got the LT, the critical LT down. So passing into my turn, remember that we've got an Azrael up here, the reinforcements arrive. And the Cascuda is going to be the big star of this particular show. And it's going to deploy just right behind the Azrael. It will turn up and immediately spend. Now, we don't know if they get AROs against reinforcements. I've arrived in his back arc anyway, and frankly, if he had turned around, I wouldn't care. Remembering that there's a missile drone watching, I've sort of got to put it in a position where, like, any more of the roof than that is like if I stray over this line, I'm going to get missiled from my trouble. But here I'm fine, and this is my Cascuda proxy for this game. The Cascuda just turns up, and it takes 2 orders, and I take a wound in the process. But the combi rifle in the back of the head takes off 1 wound, the Azrael guts, and then I chain colt it. Chain rifle it, and he heavy pistols me back. This is risky. This is a +1 damage continuous heavy pistol. The Cascuda takes 1 wound, but it puts the Azrael all the way to dead. And with that Azrael down, there is no more real long-range firepower for my opponent, which lets the Cascuda come back here, pop down this doorway, around here, and there's a HVT down there. It's able to see the HVT before it sees the missile drone, and it puts the HVT down. So jumping to the top of 3, it's probably easier to see. We then move, so the Datarazi is going to impetuous forward and then come around and use his heavy pistol to kill the second HVT. The Anathematic is going to basically move forward up to here to try and pin back a Krakot. And I will otherwise be spending, I've got very few orders across even the 2 pools, basically. Because of the damage that's been dealt to my force, because of the order pool in particular, I have 5 regular orders in one group, 3 an attack aware in another. It's collectively pretty dicey, but at this point, there's just too much material left on the table. The Chirontid is going to sort of like move forward, try and kill things, and then just run away, but it sort of doesn't really matter at this point. Chris just does not have enough left. I've got both of his HVTs now, and really all he's left with are some Ghulam infantry, a doctor. The missile drone is there, but it's not going to accomplish anything. He's got no hackers. It's just diggers and Krakots. So the diggers and the Krakots make a kind of vague attempt to attack. The Krakot will actually run around, succeed its dodge, berserk into the Anathematic, get killed by the plasma and do 1 wound. And the digger will attempt to come around here. And actually what it's going to do is a very brave effort. With all of the orders Chris has left, he moves up and up and up, and he's actually going to spec fire the Chirontid. He only has 1 order left to do it with, and although he hits the spec fire, I make my dodge, and so the Chirontid stays alive with 1 rune remaining. At this point, I don't have to play out my final turn. I have more army points killed, both of the HVTs, and more lieutenants killed. But it is kind of interesting to note that this is something that I think will happen with reinforcements. I've kept 2 command tokens, so I can consolidate my combat groups a little bit. But because reinforcements come down with their own group, I have been finding it surprisingly difficult to get consistent mileage out of reinforcements after the initial shock and awe. Because they can deploy on the halfway line, you can put them in positions where they can usually launch 1 attack kind of well, but from there your opponent can begin to react to them, and even just moving away from them can be quite effective. Now, that said, I think in scenarios where there is a scenario element at play, like acquisition, for example, they're going to be much more live because they can jump down and kind of like seize space like here, where you'd have like 2 acquisition antennas. That will make them much more live. But in a scenario like Decapitation, if, for example, you can choose to play 300 points versus with reinforcements, you actually might choose to play 300 points in the way that Chris did, because of how, yes, the reinforcements can arrive, have a moment of shock and awe, but then once they've killed the things around them, they can't really, with the orders that they have, push forward. So if I'd needed it, I've saved up 2 command tokens to yeet models into the fuller combat group, so I have at least 7 orders with the Anathematic to go and do stuff, but I've ended up it hasn't been necessary, and so this is kind of where we're at. The game comes to a conclusion. Is reinforcements versus 300 points a balanced experience? I still don't know. We can't tell from this game. I found it interesting, but also I do think, if nothing else, my preliminary conclusion is that it is going to probably feel stressful. It's going to be a very different game dynamic, but if you are the player with reinforcements against the full 300-point army, surviving that first 2 turns from your opponent is going to take some discipline. It's going to be probably some of the scariest Infinity that you can play, because, at least as far as we currently know, reinforcements don't turn up until round 2. So I think at this stage I am willing to retain some optimism that reinforcements versus non-reinforcements will be a viable way to play the game, but I don't yet know for sure if that's the case. We'll see. We'll see what the rules say. We will see what the developers think is the right way to play. We will see sort of how they kind of push this, and honestly, how the community takes it up. That's going to be a big question, and it's obviously been left kind of open to the developers. I have kind of some hope, as iterated, that we will be able to play reinforcement versus non-reinforcement. But this game, at least, has not been enough to tell me really one way or another. It was very interesting. I really enjoyed my game against Chris. It's always very fun to play against him. But frankly, I kind of just got carried here by the strength of the Anathematic and Chirontid. So kind of business as usual there, I guess. Now, real quickly before we wrap this video up, just to let people know, I've made a Buy Me a Coffee page if anyone is interested in supporting the channel. These videos will always go up on YouTube as soon as they are ready. They will always be free. This is just if you feel like supporting me either as a once-off or ongoing. It was easy to set up, and I thought people might be interested. No obligation. I'm not going to push this in any kind of regular basis. There will be a link in the description below. But yeah, if you feel like supporting the channel, I've been doing this for a while now. We've got over 100 videos up on the channel. If you've enjoyed them, particularly the longer form ones, the big videos are very challenging to make. So if you wanted to show any appreciation or support the channel on an ongoing basis, this is how you can do that. Otherwise, look, as always, I hope you really enjoyed this. This will probably be the last Infinity Battle report until Reinforcements itself drops, but that's in like 3 days. So expect some content when it arrives, talking about how basically my initial takes, how I think it will go, some potential list building dojo. I am quite willing to take requests from anyone who is an ongoing supporter of the channel, both in terms of lists, units, scenarios, stuff that the people would like me to play. In any case, as always, I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time.